Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. My name is Ron, and today we're going to be doing another tier list for Killing Floor. Now this is going to be how well each of these classes can carry tier list. So carrying is a somewhat important aspect. If everything was running absolutely ideal, you wouldn't need to carry and nobody else would on your team. Assuming everybody was at, a high level of skill, everybody could take care of themselves and add a little bit to the team overall. But that's not always the case, especially if you're like me, where you play a lot of just random matches with random people, usually on higher difficulties. And the skill can vary heavily depending on who's in there. It can be, very new people to the game that haven't really leveled up a whole lot. They don't know a whole lot about the game. They don't know very many mechanics. So you might need to help them out a bit more, or it might be a pretty grizzled veteran where they're just completely destroying everything and you feel like you don't even need to be there. I've been in games where I felt like that too. So for this list, carrying kind of can cover a lot of things, and I want to be very specific as to what I'm narrowing it down to. I'm going to be looking at carrying as if you are the last person alive and you need to still beat about half the wave worth of enemies left. Now, if you're playing like this, you will actually have Zeds slowing down. They won't be spawning in as fast as if there was multiple people. You'll also just not be killing things as quickly just because you're one person instead of potentially six. So that can play into this quite a bit, and the reason why I don't want it to be necessarily like you're really helping out the team, you're really carrying the team to keep everybody alive and safe, because that could count for a lot of factors. That could just be medic healing everybody and then nobody ever gets close to dying, and it's just technically like the medic carried the team, but not really. It was just the team all working together. Or something like, well, Sharpshooter killed all the big stuff, and could that be considered carrying the team? Well, maybe. So that's why I'm narrowing it down to just if you're the last person alive and you still have to beat roughly about half the wave. Certain classes will excel more if there's just like less of a wave. If, the last maybe 5 or so enemies is left, and everybody else is dead because maybe your, other friend got blown up by a husk or got trapped in a corner, or, flesh pounds swarmed somebody and killed them really fast. So, let's go through with that meaning, and tell me what your thoughts are down below as to which classes you think are the best for carrying the team, or, pretty much surviving if you're the last person. So, first up, we have Berserker, and Berserker is a fantastic class and very, very self-reliant. You don't necessarily need to have the team alive to still win with Berserker. Berserker's probably one of the better carrying classes, because you do have either way more health if you're running Dreadnought, especially since Dreadnought's recently been buffed, or you have Skirmisher, where you just move faster and can regenerate your health. Both are great abilities, and both make it so that you just simply can't die very quickly, assuming you don't get trapped in a corner or, run headfirst into a Raging Scrake or Flesh Pound or something like that, or a Husk blows you up. So you do have a lot of mobility, you do have a lot of survivability. You could potentially be running Vampire as well to heal yourself up even more, or even Butcher just to do more damage. Berserker is pretty good at fighting just about everything. So they're not a bad class to be the last person alive. If you're playing Berserker, then you're usually not too afraid. Especially if you're running something like the Hemoclobber. The Hemoclobber can really just keep you alive even longer. And that's going to be a pretty big fact in this. I would say Berserker is probably up into S tier as terms of carries, if everybody else dies and you can still run around and kill stuff. Berserker's not one of the worst ones to have alive at the end. There's still a high chance you could win with a Berserker still being alive. Up next is Commando. Commando's in a bit of a different situation. Commando definitely is better in a team than they are solo. Solo Commando can still do some pretty decent work, though. They can still kill most small and medium Zeds without any trouble. Ammo can be an issue if you're the only one left alive. You might need to go find somebody else's weapon. That wasn't the case with Berserker because you're likely going to have a weapon that doesn't need ammo. But with Commando, you will need ammo. You're also not particularly tanky or can move quick. You don't have any bonus movement speed, which is kind of bad. You do have bonus health and armor if you're running Tenacious. Not all Commandos run Tenacious, though. A lot of them run Prepared so that they can get extra ammo, which then ammo won't be an issue, but you'll be squishier. Well, at least it shouldn't be as much of an issue. It also depends at what wave, if everybody dies with Commando. If it's later on, that could potentially be okay, because you'll likely have 2 guns and still be able to kill stuff all right. Early on, it also probably won't be too bad, simply because there isn't a lot of large things showing up, so it's a lot of medium stuff, things that you're good against. In the middle waves, though, is where you're kind of going to struggle to carry, because you likely will start having big stuff. You likely won't have the best weapons that you could have with Commando, and it can become difficult. Commando is not one of the easiest classes to carry the team with. Assuming everybody else dies, it's probably one of the worst overall, because the most common loadout, at least at high levels, that you're going to see with Commando is probably the Medic 401 assault rifle and the FAL. The FAL has limited ammo, but it's very powerful. The Medic AR works pretty well against everything, but it obviously works better in a group because you can heal. So Commando, if Commando is like the last person alive, that's usually not a great sign. That being said, I don't know if I'm going to put it to D tier, because I think D tier is just like, you can't carry, you're going to die, and I don't think that's true with Commando. I think you can still live. It's just going to be way more difficult than other classes. Alright, up next is Support. And Support, this one kind of varies, because you're kind of like Commando, where you don't have any bonus mobility. However, Support has much stronger weapons, and can deal with pretty much everything. There's no like Z that Support is weak against. So you can just overpower a lot of things with your shotguns, especially if you're running powerful shotguns like the AA-12 or the Doomstick, or even like the double barrel. So it's not that bad. You can have increased health with Support, but Fortify is not usually a skill that a lot of supports take. Usually they take Salvo to get more damage, which does make you rather squishy. In early waves, it can be kind of difficult too, because you might not have the best weapon. Your best weapon might just be like the double barrel or the HC-12 or something, which aren't bad weapons, but you could still run out of ammo with them. It's much better if you can save it to, well, it's much better if it's later on for you, because you're pretty strong against everything. And you'll likely either have 2 very powerful shotguns that you've been throwing upgrades into, or you'll have 3 shotguns, so you really won't have to worry about ammo. Support has another factor that could kind of make it good for carrying the team in the way that I was talking about at the start of this video as to what is considered carrying, and that's because you can give ammo to your team. That might be considered, carrying the team, because if everybody doesn't have to worry about ammo, that's pretty useful. And if people are getting armor, if you're running like resupply pack, that is also really useful. If Support is the last one alive, they're not necessarily bad. They can still survive, but they might have some struggles. So I think I'm going to put them into B tier. All right, then we got Medic. Medic is a very interesting one, because Medic is the tankiest class in the game. Besides potentially Berserker, but even then, Medic still usually is tankier than Berserker. You have faster heals with your healing syringe. You have medic grenades to heal yourself and to poison enemies. You also have just passive damage resistance. If you're playing this in a team, you're likely going to be running symbiotic healing, although resistance did get buffed recently, and it's actually really strong now. So I wouldn't be surprised if people start running resilience more often with medic, even in multiplayer. So your symbiotic healing is going to give you extra health, but you're not going to be able to use the most of it, because you can't heal any allies assuming everybody's dead. That's also a problem, because you're likely going to be running 1 or 2 medic weapons, and medic weapons don't have that much damage on them. Even the strongest medic weapons, like the medic's railgun, is not as powerful as certain other classes. It's still a pretty strong weapon and a pretty good weapon, but it's not like the most ideal weapons to be using. You do have a lot of self-sustain. Like I said, you have increased healing with your syringe, and you have reduced just time waiting for your syringe to come up, which is great. It really depends on what you're going for in your loadout, though, with medic, I would say, because if you're going more of a combat medic route, if you have something like, let's say, the medic pistol and the medic SMG, and then you're running another just powerful weapon like dual 500s or something like that, maybe the double barrel center fire, that's going to make it a lot easier for you to survive because you will still just have one powerful weapon that you can rely on. I guess also if you're running the Hemoclobber with medic, that could also potentially make you last longer because you then have a weapon that can block and parry, and you have actually a weapon that can self-heal as well. Medic, not the worst class to carry with. They're probably actually one of the better classes to, have left over. They're the most likely class to not die in a big fight with the team. I'm going to put them in A tier because I don't think they're as good at carrying as like Berserker. Medic's going to take a long time to beat everything. They can potentially do it. I've done it plenty of times with Medic, but it's going to be slow, it's going to be kind of boring, and it's not always going to work out. It might just drag the game out way longer than it should, where it would have just been better if it had, everybody died right away. So Medic definitely functions better with the team. Without the team, they can still survive pretty much for quite a long time, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're always going to win. You have a high chance of winning, but not all the time. All right, so now we get to some of the more interesting classes like Demo. Usually if you're the last person up with Demo, that's not a good sign. Demo has a lot of strengths and a lot of weaknesses. They are a very risk and reward related class, and if you're the last person up, that is a very big risk and reward because you can potentially injure yourself with Demo, depending on what weapons you're using. That might not be the case if you're using weapons like the Kaboom Stick, the Grenade Pistol, the new Gravity Imploder. Any of those, you're fine without, being able to injure yourself. You could still potentially blow yourself up with dynamite, but I didn't really factor that in because otherwise Commando and support could blow themselves up too. So you do have some chance of blowing yourself up. You really don't have the best ammo cost with your weapons either, so you might not even have full ammo when your whole team dies. So you might have to go and scavenge. You might have to go and pick up somebody else's gun because your guns just simply aren't cutting it. You're running out of ammo with them. You may have trouble on more enclosed maps where you can't move around as easy and your rounds can't go off. If you're using something like the M16's underbarrel grenade launcher, the standard grenade launchers, the RPG. So Demo is a very big risk depending on what weapons you're using and how you're really playing them. They also don't have any additional tankiness or movement speed. You have, base health, base armor, and base movement speed with them. You do have your reactive armor, which could potentially save you from dying from one hit, but depending on what the hit is, that might not be enough. If it's fire damage, it might tick down your health afterwards or blow vomit or something. That being said, though, you do have a really high chance of killing anything big with Demo. If there's any sort of flesh pounds, you can destroy them. I don't know really where I'd put Demo. I'd probably put Demo lower on the list. I think I'd put him below Commando, actually, because they have such a high chance of dying. And there's so many factors that could go wrong depending on what weapons you're taking. Now, if you're taking weapons that can't hurt you and you do have a decent amount of ammo for them, like you're taking the Kaboom Stick and let's just say the M16 or something, then you'd probably be higher up on this list because at that point you can't injure yourself with those weapons, at least not easily. You could potentially with the M16's grenade, but it's pretty difficult to do that. I think if you're running that type of loadout, I'd probably put them up into B tier. But if you're running the more, higher, even higher risk, higher reward weapons like the RPG and C4 or something, the chance of making a mistake is much higher with those weapons and can't be as forgiving. So I think I'm going to put them in C tier overall, but they could go to B tier depending on loadout. All right, Firebug. Firebug can also be a very interesting class. This is going to vary just like with Demo based on what weapons you're using and how you play Firebug. Firebug does have some pretty good strengths. They're great against any sort of medium and small Z regardless of what weapon they're using. They have a lot of very cheap weapons, so early on it's not that big a deal to have to carry it with Firebug. Later on can be, because you might run out of fuel, depending on what weapons you're using. Like the flamethrower and the cock and burn have absolutely awful ammo pickup, so you don't want to be running around with the flamethrower as your only weapon. You do have some strong weapons though, like the Helios rifle and the Husk cannon can deal with pretty much everything. You don't have any additional mobility or tankiness though. You have base speed, base armor, and health. So you can die fairly easy, and having a Firebug up as the last person is not usually a good thing either, but it kind of depends, because you can be running Heat Wave, you can push enemies away, and you can do a lot of damage over time. So if you're not fighting a whole bunch of like Skrakes and Flesh Pounds with only having to use the flamethrower or something like that, then it's pretty good. If you just have to fight a bunch of small Zeds, medium Zeds with the flamethrower, great. If you have to fight like a mix of them and you're running something like flamethrower Husk cannon, again, not that bad. But you're still not additionally tanky. You're still not the best at killing big stuff. So I don't know. I'd probably put Firebug higher than Commando, but lower than Support. I feel like Support is a bit more versatile, can deal with a lot more things, and potentially can be tankier. All right, Gunslinger. Gunslinger is probably one of the better ones to have just carry the team. Gunslinger can do tons of damage, and it's going to very much depend on the actual skill of the Gunslinger, more so than perks or necessarily even weapons. Most Gunslinger's weapons could do tons of damage. You have increased mobility, so you can outrun everything. The dependency on the map is also going to change quite a bit too, because small maps, Gunslinger doesn't do particularly well on. They don't do awful, but they're not the best. You don't have any bonus tankiness, so if you have a bunch of Flesh Pounds or something, causing a Flesh Pound train, knocking them into you're just as squishy as like Firebug or Commando usually is. So that can be pretty bad. You do have just the raw amount of damage and huge amounts of DPS that you can kill pretty much everything very quickly. That's usually enough to get you through. Again, this is going to depend on skill though. For the average Gunslinger, I would probably put them at probably A tier below Medic, honestly. Because Medic is just so much more forgiving. You just have such a high chance of surviving. Whereas Gunslinger, that might not be the case for the average Gunslinger. If you're a really good Gunslinger though, then you're probably up into S tier with Berserker. Berserker is still way more forgiving than Gunslinger, but Gunslinger can potentially just carry the entire team by themselves, even if your whole team's not doing anything. Simply because you have so much damage. You likely won't be needing to worry about ammo either, because you'll probably have 3 guns, or 3 sets of guns, I should say. So I think A tier, but I think lower than Medic in terms of carry. All right, Sharpshooter. Being Sharpshooter alive at the end without anybody else, that kind of sucks. Because you don't have anybody to rely on to keep anything small away from you. And that's going to be your biggest threat as Sharpshooter. Crawlers, stalkers, anything that moves quickly, potentially even like a bunch of quarter pounds or something. And also, it's going to very much depend on the map, too, for Sharpshooter. If you have a long, open map that you can move around pretty freely in, something like Nuked, or like Infernal Realm or something, probably not that big a deal. But if you have a enclosed map, it's going to be much, much more difficult for you to survive as Sharpshooter. It's also going to depend on which weapons you took, too. If you took, like, big game killing, like railgun and like 500 Magnum, that's going to be more difficult to survive with than something like the M14 or the FAL, that are just going to be a little bit easier to kill, small and medium stuff off and deal enough damage to kill big things. So Sharpshooter, you also, if you're running that build, you won't have any increased mobility. You can have increased mobility with Sharpshooter, which does help. You don't have any additional tankiness, so you could die pretty easily, and you could also run out of ammo pretty easily too with Sharpshooter, because their ammo does cost quite a bit and you don't get very much. So if you're not the best shot, it's going to be difficult. For the average Sharpshooter, I don't know. I kind of want to put them into B tier because they do have the high amounts of damage, but at the same time, I don't think that they're necessarily better than Firebug. So I might want to move Firebug up, actually. Because I feel like Firebug, for the average Firebug, you're more likely to survive than with the average Sharpshooter. So I might put Firebug up into B tier. They're not as good as support, but they're probably better than Sharpshooter. And I think Sharpshooter can potentially be better than Demo or Commando because they don't have as many restrictions on them. They do have the ability to kill big stuff, but it's a very risky thing to be the very last one up as Sharpshooter. Usually you don't survive from that, but you can. It's very skilled. It's very skill based. It's similar to like Gunslinger. If you're really skilled with Sharpshooter, then I'd probably put you up into like A tier, because you can still kill mostly everything. It's just you have the downside of not being as fast as other classes, or dealing as much DPS or just dealing with small things as easily as like Gunslinger or Medic does. So I guess I'd put them there. SWAT. SWAT is another interesting class. If this is SWAT early on, then you're actually probably one of the best classes to carry with. If this is within like the first, like let's say 3 of 7 waves, you're pretty good with SWAT, because if you have any armor and you're likely going to be running the armor skills early on, you probably won't die. You will probably be okay. Your submachine guns are great against any of the small and medium Zeds too. They just aren't that great against big Zeds. Flesh pounds and scrakes are difficult to deal with SWAT. If you're the last one up, you're probably going to be running around trying to scavenge for ammo bags to get more flashbangs. So that's kind of a pain. Your ammo can also cost quite a bit, and if you are very liberal with your shots, then you're just gonna run out of bullets. Pretty much, you're gonna run out of ammo, which is a bad thing. You can potentially have 3 submachine guns though later on, so ammo might not be as big of a factor if you're using them correctly. If you're running around with something like the nail gun, the medic SMG, and then let's say like the UMP or something. If you manage your ammo correctly, if you're using the medic SMG against small stuff, nail gun against big stuff, and UMP to clean up just everything else, that could work. That could be fine. I believe that SWAT kind of varies though, because like in wave like 3, if everybody was dead, SWAT's still probably like S tier. However, as the match goes on, they're going to keep dropping because more and more stuff is going to show up. You're going to have less ammo. You're going to have to probably grab somebody's gun. I think that they're probably somewhere into B tier. Around the same level as Firebug, but not for the same reason. Firebug is more consistent all throughout the match, whereas SWAT has a really powerful early game and then a really kind of weaker late game. I think probably B tier. They're still probably better than Sharpshooter, I would say, for like the average Sharpshooter and the average SWAT. I would still say if you're, really skilled with all of these classes, then Sharpshooter's probably higher and SWAT's a bit lower. But I'd probably put them there. And then we have Survivalist. And Survivalist is going to be the hardest one to consider because Survivalist can be the jack of all trades and can literally do anything and can use any loadout. So depending on what loadout you have and what skills you have, this is going to depend on how well you can actually survive. Now, you do have bonus tankiness with Survivalist because if you have any armor, enemies have to break your armor before they can hit your health, which is great. You also have just passive damage resistance towards everything like Berserker. So you just take passively reduced damage, which is great. Your arsenal can vary a lot. This is going to be weaker for you if you decided to go with more of a medic build, trying to keep your teammates alive. Ironically, trying to play towards the team's weaknesses. Then you're going to have weaker weapons. You're going to have, like medic assault rifles, medic submachine guns, stuff like that. That's not as useful solo as it is multiplayer. It's not going to be awful, though. You're still going to do all right with it. But if you went with more of a damaging build, or if you went more of a tanking build, you would definitely be better. So if you went with something like the Pulverizer and like the Kaboom Stick, you would probably be all right for if you're the last person alive, because you would be mostly focused on killing big stuff and killing crowds pretty effectively. or if you went with like the Hemoclobber and like the Centerfire, where you'd have a lot of built-in sustain, as well as being able to tank with the Hemoclobber and then just high damage at long range with the Centerfire. So I think overall I'd probably put Survivalist above I'd put the average Survivalist above the average Gunslinger, I would say. If you were really good with Survivalist, they would probably also be S tier, similar to like all these A tier classes. And that's kind of the thing. If you're really good with any of these classes, you can carry. And I don't want to make it seem like, oh, if you're the last person alive with demo, then you're definitely dead and you might as well just uninstall the game. That's not what I mean at all. You should still definitely try your hardest, but I'm just saying it's generally going to be more difficult if you're the only person up and you're playing demo. Again, that doesn't mean you can't do it. It's just, it's going to be an uphill battle compared to something like Berserker, where if you're the last person up, you're probably okay. You're probably still have enough self-sustain, so long as you have at least decent map awareness and you have at least decent skills with Berserker. You can still, carry yourself and move your team up to the next match. And then hopefully you can not have to be the only person alive by the next match. So I think this is where I would put everybody on the carry list in this order, with Berserker being the best and Demo probably being the worst. And this is generally taking the average. Once again, this isn't necessarily meaning if you're, a terrible Berserker, you never play it, you're not that great at blocking or anything like that, you're going to do great. Not necessarily. Or if you're just, a fantastic demo, you can blow up everything, you know exactly what ranges to shoot stuff, to still get your explosives to go off and, not do that much damage to yourself. This is just kind of the average, at least in my opinion. So tell me what you thought about this list. I thought it was pretty fun to make. I'd like to do more tier lists sometime soon, but probably with other games, because we've been doing a lot of Killing Floor, and I think it would be kind of fun to incorporate other games into these. They're really fun to talk about, and they're really fun to discuss down in the comments below. Thanks everybody for coming out and watching this. If you guys are new here and you're not subscribed, be sure that you get subscribed. That way you can see any of my other lists, guides, videos, anything that I post on the channel. So if you'd like to support the channel in other ways as well, you can go over to the merch store, pick up some merch over there. Be sure to use discount code REPY to get 10% off. You can also pledge over at Patreon. That way you get access to early videos. I've been posting much more of them over there recently. And that's just $1 a month. Also, be sure to give this video a big old thumbs up if you enjoyed it. And I will talk to all of you guys next time. Till then, stay cool and bye.